Good evening from ŠKUC Gallery in Slovenia. We are very happy Mediterranean 19, Biennial of Young Artists of Europe and Mediterranean, is happening even in the face of pandemic. On this occasion, we want to congratulate all participating artists, curators, technicians, hosts in San Marino, BGCM staff, and everyone involved for making the Biennial possible. We are looking forward to meeting you all in person, hopefully this year. Today, I have a great pleasure introducing a performance frequently asked questions of Vesna Liponik. Ms. Liponik is a poet and an activist. Her artistic interests include literature, performance, and photography. Her texts have been translated into Serbian, German, Hungarian, and English. Dear viewers, welcome to Frequently Asked Questions.
Take off, so things, so in the face of, they fall apart, enormous and clumsy, and take off, so wither, so hands, against, only to, in the face of explosion, bare and to, I feel like in breakthrough, enormous and clumsy, and in the face of, they fall apart, so I hold, bare and take off. You scratch, a throw, hard, plastic, and I'm afraid it will be in the seed and it will, you know, I'm so small now, so I'm old, there I like you again before little one. I don't know what you think, what raccoon, I did wash you near the morning, put you to bed, then again I ran, again, a room, a night, and bamboo, and I think I know we are both there. Through the nose, the body, the night returns into the tunnel, between the hands, bent, tumescent, and you seek me there where hands. And she keeps me, she clings, with traps of all hair above water, she bursts, sharpens, vegetation wet, quiet, body with all the weight to the fur, I accelerate, she pulls the pulse out of the blanket. But don't you want to run sometimes? Run through something hidden so nobody sees you. However, let them all be there to watch. During this literary evening, I will introduce you to my post-production phase. We will go through some aspects which I have already talked about. I will also read a few lines. You wrote your things down, the text finished with, and there you are in this solid, slippery space, all alone with your texts. Then comes the time for the book. You publish the book, a first book. But what is a first book? What does the first book do? When you read reviews of various debuts, the fact that it is a debut often receives special emphasis. This problem with literary debuts is more often apparent with so-called younger poets. Thus, on one hand, we have a youthful, almost childlike experiments, and on the other hand, an adult sound, a thought-through and refined language, almost poetics. To this, we add one or a few current names from the present and or the past, people within reach, somewhere to ground a fresh, new voice. Such redemption or condemnation is, let's say, an afterword. In the second, third X book, one's diction changes. Then we can already speak in more balanced terms about poetics, changes in poetics, regression, improvement, intensification, indulgence, persistence. The direction is clear. Each period of life prepares us for our prescribed roles and positions which we are supposed to take as the years go by, so that our work does not escape the same unfortunate generational logic, the demon of the logic of years, family, aging, the three-act structure, dramatic arc, exposition, rising action, climax, falling action, and catastrophe, or maybe resolution. Within this context, a debut is surrounded by special aura. A debut is like the first sex, or the second, or the third, or I've noticed at some point you stop stuffing the holes with words. How would you describe this point? Was it like a turning point? Is there even a turning point? Let me put it this way. What do you think about when you think about the whole sentence? What do you think about when you think about the whole? It's all very physical, and it makes sense to start with silence, what manifests itself as a silence, interruption, ellipsis, void, and has the function of activation points, points of contemplation. Silence enables further speaking, trialogues, tetralogues, a whole filled with breathing. And all these phenomena are no less essential for everyday communication. This kind of space of crossing and intertwining can be called fragment, from break into pieces, break or crush, weakening, infringement, transgression, breaking into not only a lack, absence, disintegration, dispersion, but also a transgression or the exceeding of a norm, a break with the basic. This is a chronological narrative scheme: exposition, rising action, resolution, abundance. A fragment is determined by discontinuity and experiment. This is often reflected at a linguistic level when authors deliberately break established syntactic rules. It arises outside the whole and regardless of it. Then I look at it for a long time until it becomes a move burdened with certain meanings. Replace. What transforms it, it also liberates it. It reaffirms and rejects each time. I ask if it's a topos. Wholes are namely those communication elements that are most dependent on the context, and therefore, in the context of everyday speech, they most often have a multifaceted effect, together with other words. Ambiguity has a reputation as one of the essential features of poetic speech, one of the possible recommended qualities of poetic speech. Ambiguity as a strategy is primarily a lure, careful. If there is no war, one has to ask, how come there isn't? A fragment is a place of reflection of the impossibility of a full meaning as it arises around the whole, and what continuous discourse seeks to conceal, not integrate, that is various blast, seams, holes, and impossibilities with which the fragment has already been done with. In fact, this is inherent to it. It makes this visible, and this is where it is whole, and this non-acceptance of a whole. When it exists so marginally, autonomously, and fiercely, it is prone to constant invitations, relying on this general impulse. Perhaps we should trust the fragment, as fragments form constellations capable of describing more and in a more complex way, multidimensionally. A space of crossing and intertwining and meeting, a squat. Fragments, the new Sapphic rage. Now, before we move to heresy, we have this space, name it a fragment or squat, curious aspect or whatever. But what now? What do we do in this space? I mean, how important it is to do something there. I mean, what are you doing there? You were talking about invitations, and let's say, but what I really think about is touching and dancing. It's dark enough to see the surface, a catalyst for continuation. Movement is crucial, even more. Put your hands around the matter, but also sound and squat. My whole body is excited about the hands, and it is impossible to stop speaking. And I remember this article, and I remember Marie Curie, an anarchist, a lesbian, a doctor in it, saying, lingering, that is promised to anyone who stops me speaking. Well, I think it is just about time to move to heresy, already mentioned before. Punctuation is used to denote spoken interpretation, not to be subject to grammatical rules, author's note. So if for a certain text someone says that the only destructive element is that the text has no dots and no capital letters, it is clear where that person stands. Grammar is a matter of a contract, of an agreement, a rather rigorous chronological narrative scheme. Of course, there is a certain variability, a space for choice, a supermarket. But let's start with heresy. 1, 2, 3, 4 steps backwards. What are punctuation marks anyway? The body breathing rhythm, traffic signaling too, but rhythm is not a transferable thing. Breath, choreography of thought by no means, and punctuation also regulates this traffic. And with agreement about such conventions, thought is only further circumcised, molded. At least somewhere, I don't need this. At least there should be space to say something, commas, little stumbling blocks. It's much easier with dots, even parentheses, and dashes, some directed stop. And if I continue, where do you close when you end up putting a dot? Does the dot even have that much weight? What did the alienation stages of standardization do to dots? And when it hurts, the system hurts. If we are already at that, there's this useless proverb, this worn-out metaphor, do not judge a book by its cover. This is a question of approach to a book as an object with certain features, with certain elements that have, or are supposed to have, a certain function. I think it's helpful when we're not pretending the cover is not part of the book or squeeze it completely into a string. My surface concerns me. What stands at the entrance should not destroy me. Sometimes I see you standing in front of me, and most of the time you're just dressed, even if I don't think of you in that way. Book structure, you have horrible issues with it, and it was rather absurd discussing it with you every time we wanted to go up the hill or to the kitchen. Yet in your first book, you decided to make separate sections, and you were honestly annoyed with the fact that we all perceive those sections as, I'm sorry to say that, as how they look like sections. I think that's exactly where it all started. And then I walked towards myself with my arms outstretched. If I follow this assumption, I could easily place some of the texts elsewhere, but at the same time, I need a physical response. Because of possible reductions, I hesitated, and I consider again always editing less. Chronology breaks down every time I look back. How about reading a few lines? During the evenings you wait at the shore for them to swim by. You catch them and kill them, Pound them against a stone until their bodies are silent, until they stop twitching. Then you grab them so that they will be safe. You won't see them, shining, sliding visions, so that there are fewer of them each day. In the evening you return to the river. Thin, flexible foils crawling from the brittle structure, big pieces of spongy gums are dripping. For a moment, an enamel brushes up an armchair in a slimy red blush. Choking with grabbing rivers, roots changing the roots, soon it will be short, I stress, though everything in these movements may be revealed, river of belonging, only as the night river, flooding. The rabbit ran with a rabbit mask. He was touching that. Tikal je zajec zajčjo masko, se je dotikal smrti. Gozd gori, si ta gozd imenoval moj? Misliš, da zato gori? The forest is burning. Have you called this forest mine? Do you think this is why it is burning? Thank you. Let's continue. What's with the body and length? How do you know that the text is finished? Above all, one has to wait for the matter to respond. And those few words rubbing against each other, a lot of words, the body overtakes with words. Tell me more about the words. What do you want them to do? How do you want them to function? An apple is an apple. This is a political project. Everything in the language, the bodies, exaggerated, and gender, class, animal, age, all that, all the clutter, all the sections, I have a physical response.